So, the theme this year, we talked about, we're looking at, making the impossible possible, and really a lot of it is really recognizing what John and Valley have done for us as a company. For me personally, I've been here 18 years this month. I worked for an insurance company for 10 years prior to that. And, when I was working for the insurance company, my wife stayed home. We had 2 kids. We weren't poor. There was a time early in my career where, we really didn't have any money. And I remember, getting choked up because my grandmother gave me $10 for diapers because we didn't have any money for diapers. But when I came to IOA, we were kind of still living paycheck to paycheck. And the opportunities that this company gave me, personally, it's unbelievable. It's been better than I ever hoped it would be. And I do thank Valley for allowing me to come on board, because I really never interacted with John prior to coming on board, but I did with Valley. So I know that Vern Dunow, who brought me in, would have never been able to do that without Valley's blessing. So Valley, I'm always grateful for that. John has spent the last, I've been on the board 15 years. I don't know if that's longer than anybody but John, but if it's not, it's close. He's been, unlike Tony, John's been a mentor to me. He's really, he's challenged me each and every board meeting to say something that is the stupidest thing he's ever heard. And every month I come back with something and he says, that tops last month. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's been really good. So, as far as the meeting, Heath did a great job talking about where we're going. Nobody could have done the job that John and Valley just did, talking about where we've been. But there's a little bit of a word of caution. So how many people in this room know who this gentleman is? That's okay, I didn't know, I saw this. I'll give credit to where I got this from in just a second. But this gentleman's name is Jacques Nasser. And Jacques Nasser used to be the CEO of Ford Motor Company. And in the year 2000, he showed up at the National Auto Show with Jerry Yang, the gentleman in the picture with him. Jerry Yang was a co-founder and then CEO of Yahoo. And they made a statement. He got on the main stage and said, in the future, moving forward, cars are no longer transportation devices. They're methods of communication and connectivity. And they presented what they had as the cars of the future. And if you look at this car and that truck, they do look a lot like what things are today. But what was amazing was this next picture that they have up here. If you look at this is 2000. That dashboard looks a lot like a Tesla dashboard. The big computer screen, and again, thinking back in 2000, this was before smartphones. There was no such thing as an app. But these 2 gentlemen had the vision to show this is what the dashboard of a car was going to look like 20 years later, and they were right. So how is it that somebody was so right got fired? That's what happened to their stock during his tenure. So I've talked in the past about my role in this company. I spend a lot of time in industry association meetings. I go to a lot of carrier meetings. And in these meetings, I have an opportunity to talk to a lot of the presidents and CEOs and thought leaders for our carrier partners. And it's always fascinating to me to hear what some very, very smart people are looking at as the threats in our business. They talk about the technological disruptors. They talk about the changing workforce. All of the things that we talk about, a lot of the carriers focus on the exact same thing. And I stole this little analogy from a couple months ago. I was at a meeting with Travelers Insurance Company, and Alan Schnitzer, their CEO, talked about this example, and then he made a statement, and I wrote it down. If you don't perform, you can't reform, and if you don't reform, you can't perform. So what he was talking about with the lesson with Jacques Nasser is that you have to execute today in order to be able to, you're not going to be around if you don't do it. And that was the criticisms of Nasser when he got fired. They said he was too focused on the internet. He was enamored with the internet, was one of the quotes from one of the board members when they fired him. He was so focused on the future, he forgot about what he had to do today. So What can you do as producers and salespeople and service staff to help us perform? The first thing from a sales perspective is we need you to hit your sales goals. We are not, Heath referenced this, we are not a top-down goal-setting company. We're a bottom-up goal-setting company. That's radically different. A lot of our peers will go to their sales force and say, you're going to write this much new business next year, and if you don't, you're going to, you get terminated, you're going to get your commissions cut, or whatever the case is. We ask you to set your goals. You submit those in your regional presidents and your operations leaders meet with Chip, and we set a budget based off of your goals. We need you to hit the goals. John Harold, who's one of our top producers, he was up here in a panel a couple of years ago. He said it very simply. How do you be successful? He said, hit your goal. He was kind of flabbergasted, like, it's not that hard. Just set a goal and hit it. But you have to have a business plan. You have to know what you're doing. Don't just say, man, I'd love to write $300,000 in new revenue next year. If you've never done that in your life, have a plan, set out, do it. We need you to sell. He's talked about our organic growth. We are a really good organic growth company. We need to continue to be that. John talked about this. Positive working relationships with our carrier partners. A lot of the folks in this room have never sold in a hard market. They've spent their entire careers where the insurance company was coming to them saying, can we do a deal, can we do a deal, can we do a deal? Steve's going to talk about this in a minute. The market will change. The shoe is going to be on the other foot. And the reality is, we need our insurance company partners more than they need us. A lot of them will call us their clients. We're their customers. And while technically that may be true, there's a lot more brokers out there than there are carriers. We need to make sure we focus on those relationships, especially when the market becomes more difficult. Getting them to do deals is going to be based off of your relationship, and it's going to be very, very important that you continue to build those relationships over the next few years for when the change happens. Focus on client retention. So I'm going to quote John Thurman on this. Now, I don't know if he came up with this, but I heard it from him, so in my world, he gets credit. The number one growth strategy is client retention. If we increase our retention by 1%, that's the equivalent of writing $2 million in new revenue. That's a pretty big number, and we do a great job from a client retention. Margaret Richmond is our guru of numbers and data, and she's not 100% sure of what the system gives her is accurate, but she talks about our retention factor being in the low 90s. That is phenomenal. That's much higher than the industry average. And the reason we've been able to hit our organic growth is because our retention factor is that high. So what do we mean when we talk about focusing on retention? John hit on this a little bit. When he created the contract, he put it out there where you get paid the same on new business as you do a renewal. That's because our existing clients are at least as important to us as the new business. And for some of you, this is easy. I know there's agents in this room who do a wonderful job of getting to become trusted advisors, friends with their clients. They're intricately involved in their business. And so for you, this is kind of second nature. But there's other people in this room, and a lot of you all are most successful people. It's about the hunt. What gets you up in the morning, what gets you excited is the new deal. And that's what gets your juices flowing. That's great. There's a reason a lot of the folks you'll see tonight coming up with the $1 million award, that's their favorite thing. But we pay the same new and renewal because we need you focused on your retention and be as excited about that existing client as you are the new one. We do not have speech writers, by the way. We all kind of write our own speeches. So there's some redundancy in here from what John said, but do what's right for your client at all times. We talk about and we send things out. The default position inside of IOA is do what's right for your client, always, first and foremost. If you do that, retention will follow. You always want to do what's right for them. Let's see here. Continue to work on being a better insurance agent. You know, I talked about the relationship with the carriers. You need to know the marketplace. When underwriters are coming in the office, sit down and listen to what they're talking about. You know, an example of this, or brokers are coming in. You know, I was talking to Paul Beverly last night. He runs the operations in our London operation, and we had quoted for Larry McLean, we quoted an active shooter policy for an account. I've been in this business a long time. That's not something I've ever even tried to sell. I have clients who should have active shooter coverage. By talking to Paul, I became aware of something that was different and new in the marketplace. The other part is be a better insurance technician. Lloyd Humphrey is teaching a breakout tomorrow. I think tomorrow morning is the first session. He did the same thing last year. His ability to break apart a policy and understand coverages and sell what the client needs rather than the cheapest price, that comes from being an insurance technician. That's why Lloyd is a $1 million producer. He's been a very successful producer, and it's not just Lloyd. I saw Beth Hendrick in here this morning. She's one of our retired agents. I was always amazed at how well she dove into the policies and understood what the coverages are. Good insurance agents do that, and when you do that, retention goes up. Heath talked about the investments that IOA is making to be a better company. And a lot of them are focused on us as salespeople. It goes into doing what's right for your client. Steve's going to come up and talk about some things. Larry McLean and Rob Motley and Amy Wacker are going to come up and talk about a lot of what's going on in risk services. Chris Lebrecht in his breakouts. We're making a big investment in you as agents. Take advantage of it. If you want to keep your accounts, do this. If you have a casualty-driven account that's over $100,000 in premium and you don't have it in risk services, you're not doing what's right for your client. Because we do ask you to bear part of that cost. It's not a big number, but we need everybody engaging that because that's who we are in the marketplace. The last thing is we need everybody to work on their relationships with our most valuable resource, which is our people. As important as carrier partners are to us, our teams and our people that we work with, whether or not it's your partners or the people who are in the office, is the most important thing. The 1,200 people who work in IOA, that's the most important thing to us. We've challenged, as a board, we've challenged the operations leaders to engage our employees at a whole new level. They have a lot of tasks that we've put in front of them. They're working diligently to be able to connect with our employees as a company and give better paths of progression and better review processes and all of the things that we need to win what is a war for talent. We're at functional full employment inside of this company right now in this country. It is very difficult. If you go to our website, we have pages of open job descriptions for people who have experience. So if you think we're different than our peer group, we're not. We have an aging workforce. Heath talked about what percentage of the population are going to be millennials moving forward. We don't have as many people coming into this business as we have going out. On the producer side, we have the mentor-mentee program that Dustin runs and Danny and Bruce put together, that we have a great pipeline of new producers. We've challenged the operation teams to do the same thing on the inside sales team time. I'm going to steal this from Rob Motley. Rob said, we as producers are outside salespeople, and the people who are back in the office are inside salespeople. One's not more important than the other, but we're in this together. But we've challenged the operations team to really engage the inside sales teams in a way that we improve our employee retention, and we are providing the service to our clients that we really need to move forward. So let's talk about that a little bit. Human relationships. In order to have a positive human relationship with somebody, the positive interactions have to outweigh the negatives 5-1. So, when I first read that, it kind of took me back a little bit, because you think about, okay, you know what, maybe you're having a tough day. We as producers, we have a tough job. When you live on commission, you are a client getting mad about something relatively minor or something that's out of our control from taking a big pay cut. I get it. That's stressful. I live in that world. That's why we're set up the way we are. We understand that living on commission is very stressful. So what happens when we're under stress is we don't always behave as our best selves. We'll come out and we'll interact with people in a way that maybe if we were calm, it wouldn't be as much the way we would handle something. So when I was going through trying to think about the positive interactions, there's obviously some obvious things, but sometimes there are ways as type A people, we create negative interactions without knowing it. So here's some things that I want to kind of go over. John did a great job of being humble up here and talking about it took all of us to build the company. I absolutely believe that he's right. It's physically impossible for two people to be responsible for $200 million of revenue. It took us all to do this. But on your individual book of business, it's not all about you. If you look at industry surveys, if you look at our net promoter surveys that we do of our customers, what they talk about that they like about customer service, they return our phone calls. My emails are responded to promptly. If I need a certificate of insurance, you get it out right away. All of the customer service things that a lot of that's being done by the inside sales teams back in your offices. It's not all about us as producers. It's about the team. Ask for feedback. That's a way that you can subtly create ways of a positive interaction. People like to have their voice heard. Sit down and have a renewal meeting and talk about your upcoming renewals, but do it in a way where it's not you dictating, it's, okay, let's have a business plan. How are we going to attack these renewals? If you have a client meeting where you have your team with you, ask them for feedback. How'd I do? People like to have a voice and have their voice heard. It makes them feel like they're important, which they are definitely important. Ask workplace appropriate personal questions. Now, when I first wrote this, I put just ask personal questions, and then Beth Schick's face popped in my head, waving her finger at me, like, don't ask those questions. So what I mean by that is, get to know them as people. Know what they do outside of work, what's going on with their family. If they have a sick dog, that matters. Take the time to get to know them. You don't have to be extravagant, but know when their birthday is. Give them a birthday card. Take them to lunch. Little things that show you have a personal interest. It's very easy when you're a hyper type A person to overlook the fact that things are going on in their lives too. Probably the best example I have of this is Brian Buckley. Brian is as type A as anybody in this room. That guy runs a mile a minute. But he spends so much time investing in his team. Any one of those folks, they've worked with him. Some of them have worked with him for decades. They run through a wall. Now, he drives them crazy, but he spends the time he needs to spend to make them know that he appreciates what they do for him and for his accounts. This is a big one. This is something that, for me, I'm not a detail-oriented person. When I was an underwriter, I made myself focus on that stuff, and it was really hard. I'm more energized by the human interaction and what's going on with people. That's kind of how my brain works. So when you ask somebody as a type A person, like a lot of us are as salespeople, to do something that requires details and to do the details right, studies shows it takes 8 times longer than the type A person thinks to get something done. So if you've got a renewal meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning, and at 4:30 you walk up to your account manager and say, you know what, I'd really like to have a 5-year trend of rates, exposures, and losses so I can go over that in the morning with the client. You may think you've created 30 minutes of work and they can get it done by 5 o'clock. What you've really created is a 4-hour project. This is the most common mistake I think that we make. And when I talk to people inside of IOA, this is the one criticism. It's not intentional. You're not being a jerk, but you're not understanding what it is that you've just asked them to do. We do this a lot as type A people. I know I'm guilty of it. I try to step back and say, okay, how long is this going to take, and create realistic timelines. But this is something that is very, very common. we all sacrifice and work a lot of hours. John talked about work ethic. When I came on board, I asked him that question, and he flat out said what he said today: work hard. But you know what? Our account managers work hard too. If you get an email in the morning, if you get an email at night, if you get an email on the weekends, they've taken their personal time to work for your clients. Their families have lost personal time with your account manager to work on your clients. Appreciate it. Good account managers are going to do this. This is unavoidable. If you're going to do the job right as an account manager, there's going to be times when you've got to work a lot of hours, and that's okay. But we as agents need to appreciate the fact that they're sacrificing their personal time to give our customers what they need. So this last one I got from a training I went to at CIAB. So Council of Insurance Agents and Brokers is the national industry association for basic, they go the top 100 brokers. And they do a couple of things, and I've talked about it in the past. We have a council that Chris and some of his team go to the benefits piece. I go out there with the regional presidents to the property and casualty meeting. But they also provide some great training, and they do a lot of great lobbying on our behalf in Washington. They're focused on national issues. So they held a leadership training seminar in, I guess it was February of this year, in New Orleans at the World War II Museum. And so what we would do is we would go into the classroom, and they had teachers. One guy was a professor from Texas, but every other instructor came directly from the military academies, and it was the things that they teach our military officers how to be a leader. And one of the things they talked about, one of the retired colonels talked about, was that they struggle inside of the Army because most Army officers are type A people, like a lot of our folks are, salespeople. And what they teach them is state your point like you know you're right, but listen as if you're wrong. The state your point like you know you're right, that's second nature for just about everybody in this room. The listening as if you know you're wrong is very difficult. If you think about the times in your life when you've actually asked for feedback from somebody where you were like, help me, I don't understand. The way you receive that information is radically different than when you're just thinking about what's my response going to be, what's my, I know I'm right, I'm not really listening. One of the things when you do that from a subliminal message is you're sending the message that you're not important. They are important. Our inside sales teams are very, very important. So making that conscious switch when you're having those discussions from I know I'm right to show me where I'm wrong is a way to make that person feel like you value their opinion. So, in closing, you think about this. The platform for what Heath described we want to be in the future is our ability to perform today. And for us to perform today, it takes each and every person in this room, but also each and every person that's sitting back at our offices while we're here today, executing at a high level. Thank you.